Ladies and gentlemen in the Republic of Korea and the United States, welcome to our very special webinar celebrating and remembering the life of General Paik Sun-yup on his 100th birthday, which in Korea is today, November 23rd, 2020. The Korea Defense Veterans Association and the Korea-U.S. Alliance Foundation are honored to present this webinar. I am Colonel Retired Steve Lee, the Senior Vice President of KDVA. The sequence of events will be opening remarks from General Retired Vincent Brooks. I will have the honor of interviewing Miss Namhi Park, General Paik's oldest daughter, and U.S. Army Captain Christopher Paik, the grandson of General Paik. Then we will open the floor for Q&A with our audience members. You can write questions in English or Korean at any time using the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. You can do this even before the Q&A session starts. Please keep the questions short and relevant to our discussion. This webinar will be available on the kdva.vet digital library and the KDVA YouTube channel in a day or two. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce the KDVA Chairman and President, General Vincent Brooks, for his opening remarks. Sir.
All right, Steve, and thank you so much for arranging yet another, what I'm sure will be excellent webinar. So it is indeed a great honor for the Korea Defense Veterans Association, supported by our great friends, the Korea-U.S. Alliance Foundation, to host this webinar featuring Mrs. Namhi Park, daughter of the late General Paik Sun-yup. I want to thank Namhi Park for her willingness to share some of the very special memories about her father. Memories that are likely unknown to most of us who knew General Paik Sun-yup. And I'm really very much looking forward to your presentation tonight. So as Steve Lee said, today is exactly 100 years from General Paik's birth date. And having just lost him a few months ago, as many of you remember from our tribute to the general in July of 2020, his presence is still with us. And perhaps that is what makes General Paik Sun-yup so special. His presence has been with the Alliance from its origins, really at the Battle of Tabudong, the first combined battle of the Korean War. And up to the very end, General Paik Sun-yup was a champion for the Alliance, reminding us in every generation that has served the Alliance how precious and unique the Alliance is, and how we must attend to its care. General Paik Sun-yup is the most revered Korean general of the Alliance. On every dark day that faced the Alliance during the war, General Paik Sun-yup was present, providing a guiding light. At Tabudong, as I mentioned, at the Naktong breakout, at the crossing of the 38th parallel heading north, at the first arrival into Pyongyang, at the first battles against the Chinese People's Volunteers at Unsan, and the relocation to the defensible terrain south of the Chongchon River, even at the first day of the armistice negotiations. In every one of these moments, General Paik Sun-yup was there. In the book, MacArthur's Korean War Generals by Stephen Taffy, General Paik is mentioned on 11 pages. In the book, Refighting the Last War by D. Clayton James, no Korean general is mentioned as much as is General Paik. And even in the official history of the United States Army in the Korean War, in the book titled Ebb and Flow, November 1950 to July 1951, General Paik appears on 18 pages. Twice serving as the Chief of Staff of the ROK Army, becoming the first four-star general of the ROK Army, becoming the chairman of the ROK JCS, all before the age of 40 years old, when I was 2 years old and his service ended. And his service to the Republic of Korea and the Alliance following his military service can be described only as extraordinary, meaningful, broad, and enduring. So many of his actions opened a new chapter in South Korea's history as a diplomat and as a businessman, and even as a government minister. I should mention that my wife, Carol, became an expert in navigating the Seoul metropolitan subway system. Well, General Paik Sun-yup, as Minister of Transportation, oversaw the creation of subway line number 1. I could go on for a very long time to chronicle the accomplishments of General Paik Sun-yup, and I beg your forgiveness since I will not do that, and that means that I have to leave so much unsaid. Let me just conclude by saying I personally had a great affection, respect, and admiration for General Paik Sun-yup. Every one of my many encounters with him over the span of 22 years was always a learning experience, and he always treated me as a friend. So happy birthday, General Paik Sun-yup. Paik Sun-yup 장군님께 생일 축하합니다. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today for this very special event. And on behalf of the Korea Defense Veterans Association and the Korea-U.S. Alliance Foundation, thank you for your support.
Sir, thank you for that wonderful tribute to General Paik and his family in a way that only, quite honestly, you could do. And so thank you very much, sir. Now I would like to introduce Ms. Namhi Park. KDVA and KUSAF have been very fortunate that Ms. Park has allowed us into her home and into her life so that we can learn more about her father in ways that are not in history books, movies, documentaries, or museums. With her also is her nephew, Captain Christopher Paik, who will also share stories about his grandfather. So ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Namhi Park with her opening remarks. Ma'am.
On behalf of my family, I would like to thank Korea Defense Veterans Association, Korea-U.S. Alliance Foundation, especially General Brooks, Colonel Steve Lee, and participants to put forth such an immense effort to celebrate my father's 100th birthday with great pride and humility. I would like to share a little about my father. I'm sorry.
It's okay, ma'am.
He was always bigger than life to me. However, I always wondered how my father's life would be defined. In my opinion, my father's character is defined by his love of his country, his devotion to the Korean people, and his commitment to the alliance between Korea and the United States. Respect and personal honor were of most importance to him. In 1991, my father came to the United States for an official visit, and as usual, I accompanied him. One Saturday morning, he insisted on visiting his former U.S. commander, his dear friend, General Van Fleet. The only problem was we had no idea where he lived. The Korean embassy was closed. In a Google-free world, the only information I could gather was that his home was in Polk City, Florida. In true General Paik's fashion, he said, "We must go now." So with no address, no telephone number, and no advance notice that we were coming, we just went. Once we arrived at Polk City, it didn't take long to find General Van Fleet, since he was the most famous person there. Even a street was named after him. When we arrived at his house, he received in his wheelchair. The moment my father saw him, he saluted. I never saw him salute first or salute so quickly. General Van Fleet saluted him back. They hugged each other for a long time with tears in their eyes. No words were spoken. It was the most beautiful and heartwarming sight, to me at least. It was the ultimate expression of the bond we deeply cherish. We go together. 같이 갑시다. Any honors he has received, he accepted them not as an individual, but on behalf of all those who sacrificed to keep his homeland free. He accepted those on behalf of officers, men and women of Republic of Korean Army, and United States Armed Forces who sacrificed their youth in the war, and to the officers, men and women from many countries who also sacrificed their lives in the war under the banner of the United Nations, and to the Korean people who suffered the hideous agonies of the war. These weren't mere words to him. During one of the many events commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Korean War, a very old lady came up to him and said that although her 4 sons had died in Korean War, she had to come to thank him for saving South Korea from communist North Korean invasion. She said that he was the country's hero and started to bow as a sign of respect. He stopped her and said that he should not be the one honored by anybody else. And in return, he said that she is the real hero for sacrificing her 4 sons. And he bowed to her, and it's heartwarming for me to realize that a mother losing her 4 sons and yet able to thank somebody else for it. And in 2013, my father at age 93 insisted on celebrating the 60th anniversary of Korean War armistice in Washington, D.C. I was surprised that he wanted to travel because I was worried of his health. So I asked him why it was so important for him to come to the United States. He looked at me and said, "Namhi, I think this will be the last time I can thank the United States in person." I was speechless. My heart sank, realizing that what he was saying about his life, and yet was also filled by understanding the depth and his gratitude that knew no boundaries. During that trip, we visited National Cemetery in Arlington National Cemetery to pay respect to his commanders and friends, General Van Fleet, General Ridgway, General Taylor, and General McCullough, to name few. And last year, in 2019, knowing it could be his last birthday, he insisted on spending that day at 동작동 Seoul National Cemetery. So we did. He was very proud of those men. He was very proud of the Korean Army and what they accomplished since. And he was confident that Korean Army will defend free democratic Korea in the future from any attacks. Many of you call my father a hero for his achievement. But to me, he is a hero because of his heart. His humanistic and empathetic heart to those he encountered, soldiers, comrades, civilians, young and old, and even his enemies. In 1949, 12 communist sympathizers were sentenced to death. My father told them, if any of them ever come to him and ask for forgiveness, he will pardon. With that simple promise, Lieutenant Commander Park Jung-hee was freed and later became president of South Korea. When he was faced with atrocities of war, resulting numerous parentless children, he founded Baeksan Orphanage in Gwangju, Jeollado, funded by Dr. Pierce of World Vision International. during Operation Regular in 1951 to minimize casualties of North Korean guerrillas and sympathizers hiding in the mountains and local civilians. My father used airplanes to scatter 10 million leaflets over Chiri mountain range. On these papers, my father gave his personal guarantee that anyone or group willing to come out of the mountains with these leaflets will be safe and unharmed. His actions saved countless human lives, friends and foe. You see, he never forgot that we are one nation, North and South. Many people have asked why he did not become a politician. He had his opportunities. During the Korean War, President Lee Seung-man asked him to become the Minister of Interior, but he declined. He even refused the course to become President of the Republic of Korea. He thought he would best serve the country being in the military. There were many occasions where he could have become rich too. Many businessmen asked him to go joint venture, including Coca-Cola and Japanese yogurt company Yakult. He still said no. You see why I'm so proud of my dad? Although I do wish that he haven't turned down that offer from Coca-Cola. I think my father's unnoticed accomplishment was his ability to successfully serve the government under 11 out of 12 Korean presidents. This was only possible because his loyalty wasn't toward a person, but to his country. He lived for one purpose: to establish and protect a free democratic country for all. In his own words, I quote, "Without my country, I cannot exist." During his 5 days of memorial service, thousands of dignitaries and friends came to funeral home. But most unexpected, amazing thing happened. Civilians voluntarily set up altars with my father's pictures and flowers so they could pay their respect. Hundreds of thousands of people came, lined up, waiting for hours in scorching July sun or in pouring rain in the middle of coronavirus pandemic at Gwanghwamun in Seoul and in many other cities throughout South Korea. It was then I realized that my father General Paik Sun-yeop is defined by these people. My father claimed himself to be a simple soldier. But died as people's general, a savior of their country and their freedom. And his legacy will live on. I would like to take this opportunity to thank each and every person who paid their respect to my father from the bottom of my heart. And also like to express my unending gratitude to everyone that served alongside my father to protect and preserve the country he passionately loved beyond measure, Republic of Korea. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my father. I'm sorry, Steve.
Oh, no, ma'am. Wow. Just very touching. Thank you very much. General Paik did live an extraordinary life, and his exploits are well documented in history books, documentaries, and in the hearts of all service members of the ROK-U.S. Alliance with whom he defended the Republic of Korea. It is an unbelievable story of bravery, grit, determination, and self-sacrifice, all for love of country and their families. So, Ms. Park, let's get to know your father and your family even a little bit better. So the first question is, why do you think he spent his life dedicated to a strong ROK-U.S. alliance?
I think we should put things in perspective. My father was born under Japanese occupation and lived through tragedy of not having a country he can call his own. So his determination to keep a free democratic country is understandable. I cannot speak in terms of politics or economics, but on a very personal level. Grandson of General Van Fleet, Mr. John McChristian, he's a good friend of mine, passed on to me a personal letter of his grandfather to his grandmother. It was written on June 1st, I think 1952. After citing my father's long accomplishments, he writes, I read it from the letter, his division acquitted itself with honors when the North Koreans attacked in June of 1950. And now he is a corps commander, one of the best we have, or that I could ask for. A loyal and splendid fighter, and he is only 31 years of age. The day that my father got promoted to 4-star general, in my father's book, he writes, President Lee pinned one set of 4-star on one shoulder of his uniform, and General Van Fleet pinned another set on the other shoulder. See, making a first 4-star general in Korean history was the outcome of trust, respect, and friendship between an American general and Korean president. And I'm sure these two sets of 4 stars weighed a lot more on my dad's shoulder than anyone could imagine. He became the bridge between Korea and the United States. And he carried that weight till he passed away. During the Korean War, he witnessed firsthand what American core values were and how they were implementing them. He saw American soldiers' loyalty to a foreign commander when it was justified, generals who were advising him and planning battles to safeguard Korea, even their own countrymen's lives were in jeopardy. And US President Eisenhower, and congressmen willing to help an undeveloped country and to accept mutual defense treaty because of this soldier who was patriotic and sincere. My father really had a great admiration and respect for the United States. He saw America's sincerity, empathy, and values. ROK-U.S. alliance started with my father's personal conviction, and I cannot emphasize more strongly how convinced he was. He believed in mutual trust, respect, and friendship. He believed that United States was trustworthy for him to dedicate his life for strong ROK-U.S. alliance.
Well, wonderful. So on the same theme about his thoughts on the United States, what did you learn from your father about the United States?
There are so many things that I learned, but as far as I can remember, when I was 4 or 5 years old, I was always grew up among military personnel. And every chance my father had, he took me to meet American generals, such as waking me up in the middle of the night to go present flowers to American generals arriving at airports. And trust me, there were many, many generals arriving at the airports. And I remember playing at General Van Fleet's residence on top floor, 8th floor of Pando Hotel, which was the tallest building in Korea back then. And I have to say that it had a water closet. I remember that. I also learned that all American generals were very tall and very handsome. The best part was observing their military salute. Fascinating to watch. Even now, growing up, my father taught me the importance of presence of U.S. military in Korean Peninsula. He always said that strength of United States came from Christian values and its ability to come to center, like pendulum. He said it swings back and forth, but always the center is the core. And I think that's a quality not too many countries has, but he really thought US was the only country who could be in the center and the core of the world.
Oh, wow, wonderful. So I really appreciate the personal perspective. So my next question is, could you take us inside your family circle and tell us what were some of his life lessons for you and your siblings?
Unlike everybody scared my father, but at home, my father was not a discipliner at all. Like my whole life, it's hard to even for me to believe, but he never said no to me. However, over the years, he emphasized what was important to him and then what we should work for. He was big in being a person with big heart, no hasty decisions, and face reality as is. And if there is a will, there is a way. But more than that, more than what he said, I learned much more watching him, such as discipline, diligence, grit, defender of what is right, always be on time, always learning, and always look at someone's positive side, and always be prepared. And when I was a child, every time my father would say that, in my head, I said, prepare for what? But anyway, there were many, many things we could learn from him. And something that he tried till last minute of his life is conquering oneself. He said that was the hardest task. And he really tried till the minute he passed away.
Well, again, you shared with us so many wonderful stories. I'd like to know if there are any favorite stories about your father that perhaps that you've passed on to your children. Would you mind sharing any of those with us?
Yeah, I think he had this gift to be a general, and I'm not kidding. It's his voice he had this resonating, thundering voice that everybody was scared of. And I'm sure some of you heard his thundering voice. And if you heard it once, you'll never forget it. And that thundering voice literally would shake my house and everyone in it. Everybody would be just freeze. And the only person who was kind of not scared of him was me, because he never would use thundering voice to me. But I think I had a calming effect on him, especially when he was not in good mood. And his aides knew it. So when they were alerted that my dad was coming home, they would find me from playground, from friend's house, from anywhere, and just drag me home. And another really special quality that he had was, I think, it's his dedication to his job. He was so determined to give 1,000% of him. And even as a civilian, my father always woke up at 5 a.m. And by 6 a.m., he was ready to go in his jacket and tie, even on Sundays. He always regretted that Korean military weren't ready on Sunday, June 25th. Normally, his driver used to pick him up at 6:30. Then he would go to Dragon Hill for breakfast, and we all know that. He loved to go to Dragon Hill for breakfast and be at the office by 7:30. After a while, my father realized that he should give more time to the driver. So driver picked my father up at 7, but still be at the office before 8 o'clock. After many years, one day, one of his aides kind of begged him not to come to work so early. So he delayed by 1 hour. And I think if he had a choice, he would stay at the office 24/7 and be prepared.
I remember you telling us a story about there was a contrast between how your father was always on time, military time, but your mother was not always on that. What was that?
Well, my father, to go to any appointment or cocktail or dinner, my father was always ready on time. No, at least 30 minutes or 1 hour early, contrary to my mother, who was always 30 minutes late. So my father would modify the actual time and advance it for like 30 minutes. And if my mother finds that out, then she would not be happy. But
I think that's good. I think that's good advice for anybody that has difficulty getting to places on time. I also remember in talking to you before, there was a funny story about how your husband met your father for the first time. Would you like to share?
Yeah. The first time my husband Don met my father, we were sitting at the living room, and my father did not speak for at least 2 hours, and he was just chain smoking the whole pack of cigarettes. And after he finally finished the whole pack of cigarettes, he spoke. And to my utmost surprise, he says, "Is there love?" And my husband, Don, was so scared. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He just nodded. So with that, my father gave us the permission. But I never realized that my father was a romantic, and I never realized that love was very important to him, which he never really showed. So that was a good surprise for me.
Well, there is no better advice, I think. I'm also the father of two daughters and two sons like he was. And love is the most important thing, right, that you can hope for your children. And I noticed the picture above your left shoulder. I think that exemplifies the love that he had for you. Is there any story behind that picture, ma'am?
That picture was taken by Herald Tribune, and they came especially to take a picture of me and my dad. And they tried with me in different outfit and, make me pose for the picture, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, there was that picture that you have there is what my dad and me were doing every day when he came home.
Well, wonderful. So now, you know what, I'd like to introduce the audience to Christopher Peck. Captain Beck graduated from Northwestern University in 2013. He joined the Army and was commissioned through Officer Candidate School. He is a military officer serving at Joint Base Lewis McChord, Washington State. So Christopher, we'd love to hear any stories you have to share about your grandfather, please.
Thank you very much, Colonel Lee, General Brooks, and honored guests. Thank you for gathering today to honor the memory of my grandfather on his 100th birthday. My brother and I knew General Peck, not as General Peck, but as Grandpa Peck, Harabuji in Korean. As little kids, we were awed by, if anything, how old he was. Grandpa Peck loved nothing more than to sit next to us and quietly hold our hand. What conversation there was consisted mostly of I love yous, loud and very thunderous, I love yous. As we grew older though, Grandpa Peck would regale us with tales of his past. He awed us then with his memory. He'd recall all of his medals, including the 2 Taegu medals, the 4 Legions of Merit, and then the American Silver Star. He talked about his trip to Washington, D.C., where he met with President Eisenhower and negotiated the Mutual Defense Treaty. He'd recall the smallest details of the leaders he'd served with, where they'd commissioned, the units they'd commanded, the major campaigns they'd fought in. And then he'd grin slyly and, because he could, he'd say where they'd received graduate degrees. After I became an adult and joined the Army, I became awed by my grandpa's wisdom. Early in my career, I asked my grandfather what the key to successful leadership was. He turned and looked at me as if I had asked the most obvious question in the world and said, hard work. You must work hard. My grandfather lived that creed. After a long history of service as a military officer, ambassador, and government minister, my grandfather finally retired in 2015 at the age of 95. I asked him one time what he did during his retirement. What did he do to stay active and healthy? He answered, every morning, PT, physical training. But then he grinned almost guiltily and added, 8 o'clock, not early, 8 o'clock. Of course, like many retired soldiers, my grandfather quickly grew bored with his abundant free time, and so he went back to work. He would work right up until he passed away, insisting on his deathbed that there was so much left to do. This brings me finally to my grandfather's legacy. For me, remembering my grandfather boils down to understanding what he wanted to be remembered for. Of all the foreign awards and accolades my grandfather received, he treasured one above all others, the Silver Star he received from the United States Army. He treasured the Silver Star not as a symbol of his own importance or heroism. Rather, he treasured it as an affirmation of the close relationship between the armies of the Republic of Korea and the United States that he had worked so hard to foster. My grandfather understood that the survival of a free and prosperous Korean democracy relied upon the mutual assistance and shared sacrifice of allied nations, particularly the United States of America. For more than 70 years, my grandfather worked tirelessly to further that bond, to ensure the shared sacrifices of Koreans and Americans was remembered, and to ensure the lessons of the Korean War were not forgotten. Yet his work remains incomplete. To use his words, there is much left to do. Thank you again, General Brooks and Colonel Lee, for inviting me to speak. And thank you all for taking the time to honor my grandfather and his legacy.
Hey, Christopher. Wow, really well stated. I mean, I appreciate that. I think it was a perfect compliment to what your aunt said. So thank you very much. I'm going to go to some of our audience who've written some comments, questions. The first one, it goes to Mr. Brian Campbell. For those of you that don't know, he's a wonderful manager of the Dragon Hill Lodge that Ms. Park mentioned that her father has such fond memories of. And so let me just read his comment to everybody just to share his appreciation. He says, on behalf of the current and past Dragon Hill Lodge family members, we were honored to have as our most honorable guest, General Paik and his wife almost daily, and sometimes multiple times a day, coming to Dragon Hill Lodge or to the Hartel House to have breakfast, lunch, or dinner with us. General Paik and his wife were my favorite guests, and I enjoyed having them here at the Dragon Hill. It was an honor to meet them, and I consider them as very special members of our Dragon Hill Lodge family forever. For those of you that are fortunate to be serving in the Republic of Korea, whether you're Korean or you're part of the American USFK force and all working for the Combined Forces Command, if you get an opportunity, please go stop by the Dragon Hill Lodge and you can see the places where General Paik actually went and enjoyed his time. Very fond memories. So Mr. Brian Campbell, thank you for that. Really appreciate your kind words. I also have some other, this is from the member of Korea's National Assembly, Mr. Cho Tae-young. And he said, I would like to say that the Korean people gratefully remember General Paik's dedication and contribution to the young, fragile democracy under mortal attack. So another wonderful testimony and remembrance of him. I'd like to go to one other person, had a wonderful comment here. He is a retired South Korean Marine Corporal, Mr. Lee Jong-hae. He goes by now John Che, I think. General Paik was my hero growing up in Seoul, and I had witnessed the tragic war in Seoul and the vicinity as a 9-year-old boy. He was a truly great patriot. Not even a history book can accurately describe him. He was also the general who recommended to pardon General Park Chung-hee. It was sad to read about the tragedies that fell in his life. I gave my military salute to his portrait of honor on his passing. For those of you that maybe that don't know, when General Paik passed away on the 10th of July this past year, KDVA was very fortunate to be able to do a tribute webinar, and it was an amazing gathering of senior leaders in the ROK-U.S. Alliance who all wanted to participate, to say their farewells, and to talk about how great of a man he was and the importance that he was for the ROK-U.S. Alliance. Let me go to a couple more questions, if I could, Ms. Park. I think that we would like to know, perhaps, what did General Paik, what were some of his favorite stories? Would you mind sharing any of those?
Of course I would. His favorite stories was about his childhood. And he was the happiest when he was telling me stories of his brothers and his mother and his sister. While he was attending primary Pyongyang normal school, he never could bring lunch box to school. He said not even once, because there was no food at home. So during lunch period, he would leave the classroom, go outside, and pretend that he was playing. And he did that, I mean, I do not know for how many years. But from that, he said he was able to become first 4-star general. So he would tell me that if there is a will, there is a way. And he would tell me stories about his brother, 3 years younger than him. His brother used to throw his school backpack down the bridge to riverbank. Then my father had to run down and get it so they would not be late to school. And he said his brother did that every single day. And I mean, it's all stories about how poor they were, but I guess it was not uncommon, but still it hurts me. Like one thing that he really didn't like was barley rice. But growing up, they did not have money to eat white rice. So grandmother made barley rice with sprinkle of white rice on top. So once barley rice is cooked, she would scrape the top off and just give that part to my father. Other than that, he never complained about food. But of course, this made my uncle very upset. And about his mother, he was very close to his mother, as you can see. His mother would give white rice only to his first son. And my grandmother was a very strong lady. She raised 3 children by herself. She had 2 sons in the army. So she was known as only mother with 7 stars. You see, my uncle was a lieutenant general. In the 1950s, she was known as the most powerful woman. And I do not know if this generation know, but my father's generation know how my father's filial piety was well known. And when, for example, when my grandmother started to live alone, my father brought her breakfast every morning at 6:30 and then go to work. And if I can add this, he just wasn't just a great soldier and great father, but he was also a devoted son. And as Christopher explained, a great grandfather. And my daughter want to make sure that I let everyone know that he was also a super great grandpa. And to my grandchildren, he is a true Superman.
Well, wonderful. I think we have time for one final question. Did your father really admire anyone? Does anyone really stand out?
Steve, that's a great question. He had this amazing personality where let me track this back. He could find greatness in every person, from soldiers in his ROK-U.S. division, American soldiers under his command, young student who would join him in the middle of the war, civilian support to general and president. And his admiration came from his observation in details. For example, one of the things that my dad admired President Lee Seung-man was his contentment in eating soybean paste casserole and rice and no other food, just that, and eat lunch with my dad. And he told this story saying how President Lee thought that my father and they were very lucky to able to eat soybean paste casserole. And my dad thought that was one of the part that President Lee was very admirable. And of course, he admired General Van Fleet, seeing his reaction after his son was shot down behind enemy lines. Like workers jumping into boiling hot flaming red furnace to fix the machine, the furnace inside. And he was not saying them to me, but also to himself. So he could emulate them. And I think that was part of conquering himself, that he tried so hard. And if admiring came easy to him, he also did not like to point out weakness or faults of others. In all his books or interviews, he would never criticize or malign anyone. And I think that is a quality hard to come by.
Well, ma'am, again, thank you very much for sharing just amazing insights. Let me just add one final comment from one of our audience members. It's pretty anonymous, but I think it captures the sentiment well of the Korean people. The gentleman writes, I met General Paik last year. I could feel he is a strong man. I thank General Paik's family for sharing his individual life, a very touching story. I would say we, Koreans, all owe him, and I cannot imagine how much pressure he had when he was in uniform. And I think that's just a wonderful way to sum up. So we'll come to the close of our time together. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say that, I've been a part of a lot of great events and webinars, but this one has been the most unique. Nowhere else will we be able to find stories like the ones that General Paik's family just shared with us. I am so thankful that we were here to learn another side of General Paik Sun-yup, beyond General Paik or Ambassador Paik, but as Paik Sun-yup, father, husband, grandfather. It is truly an immeasurable gift that the Paik family has given to us, and KDVA and KUSAF are very, very thankful. In the years to come, we will continue to visit with Ms. Park and her family as different events mark special occasions in Korean and ROK-U.S. alliance history, and ask her for what her father's perspectives were, as well as hers. And perhaps we'll even bring back Christopher. So please stay tuned. If you would like to add your voice to supporting KDVA, KUSAF, and the ROK-U.S. Alliance, please consider joining KDVA. It is free and it only takes a few minutes at kdva.vet. And of course, donations are always welcome and greatly appreciated. So thank you everyone very much, and together for the ROK-U.S. Alliance.